David had been working in the music industry for what felt like forever. 15 years of listening to wannabe stars, scrolling through demo tapes and sitting through auditions that made his ears hurt. He'd seen it all. The good, the bad, and the downright terrible. His studio was tucked away in a busy part of downtown, sandwiched between a coffee shop and a bookstore. The walls were covered with gold records and photos of famous artists he'd worked with over the years. But lately everything felt the same. Same songs, same dreams, same disappointments. It was a Tuesday afternoon when his assistant knocked on his door. Lisa had been with him for 3 years now, and she knew better than to waste his time. But the look on her face was different today. There was something in her eyes that made him put down his phone. "There's someone you need to hear," she said. David sighed. He'd heard that line 1,000 times before. "Lisa, I've got 3 meetings this afternoon and a deadline tomorrow. Unless they're the next Mozart, I don't have time. Just trust me on this one," she insisted. "This woman, she's not like the others." He rubbed his tired eyes. The truth was he was getting burned out. The magic he once felt when discovering new talent had faded somewhere along the way. Music had become just business. Numbers on a spreadsheet, views on a video, likes on a post. "Fine," he said. "But give me 10 minutes to grab some coffee first." When he came back, there was a woman sitting on the couch in his waiting area. She didn't look like most people who came through his doors. No designer clothes, no expensive jewelry, no team of people hovering around her. She wore simple jeans and an old sweater that looked like it had seen better days. Next to her was a worn leather notebook, the kind you'd find at a thrift store. David walked past her into his office, assuming she was waiting for someone else. But Lisa followed him in and whispered, "That's her. Her name is Isabella." He looked back through the glass door. The woman was staring at the gold records on his walls, but not with the usual starry-eyed expression most newcomers had. She looked almost sad, like those achievements meant something different to her. "All right," David said, straightening his shirt. "Send her in." Isabella walked into his office with quiet confidence. Not the cocky kind he was used to seeing, but something gentler. She shook his hand with a firm grip and sat down across from him. "So, Isabella," David began, pulling out his standard questions. "What makes you special? What can you do that nobody else can?" She smiled, but it wasn't the rehearsed smile of someone trying to impress him. "I'm a pianist," she said simply. David felt his heart sink a little. A pianist. In an industry obsessed with pop stars and viral hits, classical instruments were a tough sell. He'd heard countless pianists over the years. Some were technically perfect, hitting every note with precision. Others played with passion but lacked skill. Very few had both. "Okay," he said, trying to sound encouraging. "And what's your angle? What makes your piano playing different?" Isabella opened her notebook and flipped through pages filled with strange diagrams and notes. "I know this might sound odd, but I don't just play music. I compose emotional frequencies." David blinked. "Emotional frequencies?" "Yes," she said, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "I've been researching how specific musical patterns affect human emotions. It's based on neuroscience and years of study." He leaned back in his chair. Here we go, he thought. Another person with some wild theory about music. He'd met plenty of them before. People who claimed their songs could heal diseases or unlock hidden powers in the brain. It was always the same story, and it always ended with disappointment. "Right," he said, glancing at his watch. "Well, why don't you play something for me? The piano's right over there." He gestured to the grand piano sitting in the corner of his studio. It was his pride and joy, a beautiful instrument that had cost him more money than he'd like to admit. But it was worth it for the sound it produced. Isabella stood up and walked over to the piano. She didn't stretch her fingers or warm up like most pianists did. She simply sat down, adjusted the bench slightly, and placed her hands on the keys. Then she looked back at him with an unusual question. "What emotion do you want to feel?" David almost laughed. "What? What emotion do you want to feel?" She repeated calmly. "I can play for joy, sadness, nostalgia, hope. Whatever you need." This was getting weirder by the minute. But David was already running late for his next meeting, so he figured he'd play along. "Surprise me," he said with a smirk, crossing his arms over his chest. He expected her to launch into some complicated classical piece, something by Beethoven or Chopin. Instead, Isabella closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play something he'd never heard before. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant. They floated through the air like dandelion seeds on a summer breeze. David found himself leaning forward, his skepticism momentarily forgotten. There was something about the melody that felt familiar, even though he'd never heard it before. Then the music began to shift. The gentle notes grew warmer, richer. A chord progression that shouldn't have worked somehow did. And then something impossible happened. David felt his chest tighten, not in a bad way, but in the way it does when you remember something precious you'd forgotten. He saw himself as a 7-year-old boy, sitting at his grandmother's kitchen table. The smell of her famous apple pie filled his nose. He could hear her humming as she cooked, could feel the warmth of the afternoon sun coming through the window. His grandmother had been gone for 12 years now. He hadn't thought about those afternoons in her kitchen for a long time. Life had gotten too busy, too complicated. But here, right now, with this stranger playing a piano in his studio, he was back there, safe, loved, home. The music continued to evolve. The nostalgia transformed into something else. Hope. Pure, unfiltered hope for the future. David felt tears welling up in his eyes, and he didn't even understand why. He wasn't a crier. He was a businessman, a professional. But here he was, sitting in his own office with tears streaming down his face. Isabella played for maybe 3 minutes, though it felt both longer and shorter at the same time. When she finished, the last note hung in the air like a question waiting to be answered. David sat frozen in his chair, unable to speak. His carefully constructed walls had crumbled, and he felt raw and exposed. She turned around on the piano bench and looked at him with kind eyes. She didn't seem surprised by his reaction. In fact, she looked like she'd seen it 100 times before. "How?" David started, but his voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. "How did you do that?" Isabella stood up and walked back to her chair, bringing her notebook with her. "Like I said, I study emotional frequencies. The relationship between music and the human brain. Every emotion has a pattern, a mathematical formula, if you will. When you play the right combination of notes at the right tempo with the right rhythm, you can unlock specific feelings in people." David wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, not caring anymore about looking professional. His entire understanding of music had just been turned upside down. After 15 years in this business, after working with some of the biggest names in the industry, this unknown woman with a worn notebook had just shown him something he'd never experienced before. "This isn't just talent," he said quietly. "This is something else entirely." Isabella nodded. "It's science meets art, and I've been developing it in secret for 10 years. David looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since she'd walked into his office. This wasn't just another musician looking for a break. This was someone who had discovered something revolutionary, something that could change everything he knew about music. His hands were still shaking as he reached for his coffee, now cold and forgotten. Whatever meeting he had next didn't matter anymore. The deadline he was worried about seemed meaningless, because sitting across from him was possibly the most important discovery of his entire career. "Tell me everything," he said. David canceled all his meetings for the rest of the day, something he never did. His assistant looked shocked when he told her to reschedule everything, but he didn't care. What he'd just experienced was too important to let slip away. Isabella sat across from him, her worn notebook open on the desk between them. The pages were filled with things that made his head spin. Mathematical formulas mixed with musical notes. Diagrams of the human brain with different sections highlighted. Charts showing wave patterns and frequencies. It looked like something between a science textbook and a composer's journal. "I know this probably looks crazy," Isabella said, noticing his confused expression. "Most people think I've lost my mind when they see this." "I don't think you're crazy," David replied, still wiping the last traces of tears from his face. "I just experienced something I can't explain. That music, it took me somewhere, made me feel things I haven't felt in years. That's not crazy. That's extraordinary." Isabella smiled, but there was sadness in it. "You're one of the few people who's actually given me a chance to show what I can do. Most producers hear my explanation and show me the door before I even touch a piano." David felt a pang of guilt. He'd almost done the same thing. If Lisa hadn't insisted, he would have sent Isabella away without a second thought. How many other talented people had he dismissed over the years just because they didn't fit into his idea of what success looked like? "Tell me your story," he said, leaning forward. "How did you figure all this out?" Isabella took a deep breath as if deciding how much to share. Then she began. My mother suffered from severe depression for most of her life, she said quietly. I grew up watching her struggle with it. The medications helped sometimes, but they also made her feel like a different person. Therapy helped too, but there were days when nothing could pull her out of the darkness. David listened without interrupting. He could hear the pain in Isabella's voice, the weight of those memories. But there was one thing that always seemed to reach her. Isabella continued. Music. When she was having a really bad day, I'd play piano for her. Nothing fancy, just simple melodies. And I noticed that certain songs affected her differently than others. Some made her more relaxed. Some gave her energy. Some made her cry, but in a good way, like the tears were washing something away. She flipped through her notebook, stopping at a page with a photo of a woman with kind eyes and graying hair. Isabella's mother. I started paying attention to patterns. Which chord progressions helped the most? What tempo worked when she was anxious versus when she was sad? I was only 16 then, and I didn't really understand what I was doing. I just knew it worked. So you started researching it, David said. Eventually, yes. I went to college and studied neuroscience. My professors thought it was strange that I was so interested in music and the brain, but they supported my curiosity. I spent hours in the library reading everything I could find about sound therapy, ancient healing music, how different cultures used rhythm and melody for emotional and physical healing. Isabella's eyes lit up as she talked about her research. This wasn't just a career for her. It was a calling. I discovered that certain frequencies actually do affect our brainwaves, she explained. There's real science behind it. When you hear specific patterns of sound, your brain responds in measurable ways. It's not magic or mysticism. It's biology. David was fascinated. He'd spent his whole career in music, but he'd always thought of it as art, as entertainment. He'd never considered the scientific side of why music made people feel things. I spent 10 years developing what I call emotional algorithms, Isabella continued. They're like recipes. If you want to create a feeling of peace, you need these specific frequencies, this tempo, these chord progressions. If you want to help someone process grief, there's a different combination. It's incredibly complex, but once you understand the patterns, you can compose music that targets specific emotional states. She pulled out another page from her notebook, this one covered in graphs and numbers. The piece I just played for you was designed to evoke nostalgia first, then transition into hope. I chose those emotions because I sensed you were feeling burned out, tired, like you'd lost touch with why you got into music in the first place. David felt a chill run down his spine. How did you know that? Body language. The way you talked. The tiredness in your eyes. I've gotten pretty good at reading people over the years. Isabella closed her notebook gently. Music can remind us of who we used to be. It can also show us who we might become. That's what I wanted to give you. For a moment, neither of them spoke. David could hear the distant sounds of traffic outside, the hum of the air conditioning. But inside this office, everything felt still. Sacred almost. Why did you come to me? David finally asked. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a therapist. I'm just a guy who produces albums. Because scientists dismissed my work as too unconventional, Isabella said with a bitter laugh. They wanted controlled studies and peer reviews and years of testing before they'd take me seriously. And therapists were interested, but they didn't have the resources to help me develop this further. I needed someone in the music industry, someone who understood both the creative side and the business side. But most producers turned you away. All of them, actually, until today. You're the first one who let me play. David felt the weight of that responsibility settling on his shoulders. He'd stumbled into something massive, something that could change people's lives. But he also knew how the industry worked. It was cutthroat and competitive. People stole ideas. They took credit for other people's work. They cared more about profit than purpose. I want to help you, David said. But I need to be honest with you. This industry can be brutal. If word gets out about what you can do, there will be people who try to exploit it. Companies that want to own your research. People who'll try to commercialize it without caring about your original intentions. Isabella nodded slowly. I know. That's what scared me about coming here. But my mother passed away last year, and before she died, she told me something I can't forget. She said I was keeping this gift to myself out of fear, and that fear was preventing me from helping other people who were suffering like she had suffered. Her voice cracked slightly, and David could see her fighting back tears. She made me promise I'd find a way to share this with the world, even if it was risky, even if people didn't believe me. She said some things are too important to keep hidden. David understood that kind of promise, the kind you make to someone you love before they leave you, the kind that changes the entire direction of your life. Okay, he said firmly. Here's what I think we should do. Before we go public with any of this, let's document it properly. I want to record you playing different emotional algorithms. I want to capture people's reactions. Real reactions like what just happened to me.
We need proof that this works, that it's not just some fluke. Isabella's eyes widened with hope.
You really think people will believe it? I don't know, David admitted. But I believe it. And after 15 years in this business, I've learned to trust my gut. What you have here isn't just music. It's not just science. It's something that sits right in between, and that's exactly where the magic happens. He stood up and extended his hand across the desk. Isabella stood too and shook it. Her grip was firm and confident, but he could feel her hand trembling slightly. This was a big moment for both of them, and they both knew it. There's one condition, though, David added. We do this the right way. We don't cut corners. We don't sell out to the first company that waves money at us. This is about helping people, like your mother said. We keep that at the center of everything we do. Isabella's face broke into the first genuine smile he'd seen from her all day. Deal. As she gathered her notebook and prepared to leave, David felt something he hadn't felt in years. That spark, that excitement, that feeling of being part of something bigger than himself. Isabella, he called out as she reached the door. That piece you played today, does it have a name? She turned back, her hand on the doorknob. I call it coming home because that's what I hope it helps people do. Find their way back to themselves. After she left, David sat alone in his office for a long time. The sun was setting outside, casting orange light across his gold records and awards. All those achievements suddenly felt small compared to what he'd just witnessed. He pulled out his phone and started making notes. Ideas for recordings, places they could test Isabella's music, people who might help them. His mind was racing with possibilities. For the first time in a very long time, David felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Doing exactly what he was supposed to do, and it all started with being willing to listen. 2 weeks later, David's studio looked completely different. He'd cleared out one of the recording rooms and set up cameras at different angles. Comfortable chairs lined one wall, waiting for the people he'd invited to participate in what he was calling the experiment. Isabella arrived early that morning, carrying her notebook and a thermos of tea. She looked nervous, which was understandable. They were about to test her life's work in front of strangers, and everything depended on whether it actually worked for other people the way it had worked for him. How are you feeling? David asked, helping her set up near the piano. Terrified, she admitted with a shaky laugh. What if it only worked on you? What if I just got lucky that day? David had thought about that too. Late at night, lying awake in bed, he'd wondered if maybe he'd just been emotional that day. Maybe he was just tired and stressed, and any decent piano music would have affected him. But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. What he'd experienced was too specific, too powerful to be coincidence. It's going to work, he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Trust yourself. The first participant arrived at 9 in the morning. Her name was Patricia, a middle school teacher in her early 50s. David had met her through a friend and explained they were testing a new type of music therapy. She'd agreed out of curiosity, though she'd made it clear she was skeptical about the whole thing. I don't really believe in all that alternative healing stuff, Patricia said as she sat down in one of the chairs, but I figured what's the harm in listening to some piano music? David smiled and gestured to Isabella, who sat at the piano looking pale but determined. We're just going to play something for you. All you need to do is listen and tell us how it makes you feel. There's no right or wrong answer, Patricia shrugged. Okay, sure. Isabella positioned her hands on the keys and glanced at David. He gave her an encouraging nod. Then she began to play. The melody started soft and gentle, like morning light filtering through curtains. David watched Patricia's face carefully. At first she looked bored, almost impatient. But after about 30 seconds, something changed. Her shoulders relaxed. Her breathing slowed. The tension she'd been carrying in her jaw melted away. Isabella continued playing and the music shifted into something warmer, more hopeful. Patricia's eyes widened, and then to David's amazement, tears started rolling down her cheeks. Not sad tears. These were different. Cleansing tears, When the music ended 3 minutes later, Patricia sat frozen in her chair. She touched her wet cheeks with trembling fingers, looking confused and overwhelmed. "I don't understand," she whispered. "What just happened?" Isabella stood up from the piano and walked over gently. "What did you feel?" Patricia struggled to find words. I saw my daughter. She's been away at college for 2 years and I've been so worried about her. Worried that I didn't prepare her enough, that I wasn't a good enough mother. But just now, listening to that music, I felt this peace, like everything was going to be okay, like I'd done my best and that was enough." She looked up at Isabella with wonder in her eyes. "How did you know? How did you know that's exactly what I needed to feel?" Isabella smiled softly. "I didn't know your specific situation, but I composed that piece to help people release worry and find peace with their choices. The music speaks to whatever burden you're carrying." David felt goosebumps on his arms. It had worked. It wasn't just him. This was real. Over the next few hours, they recorded sessions with 8 more people: a retired firefighter dealing with trauma from his years of service, a young woman struggling with anxiety about her future, a man going through a difficult divorce, a college student overwhelmed by pressure from his family. Each person had the same reaction: disbelief at first, then complete surrender to whatever emotion the music unlocked. Some laughed. Some cried. Some sat in silence with expressions of pure relief on their faces. Every single one of them asked the same question: "How did you do that?" By the end of the day, David had hours of footage. Real people having real emotional experiences. This wasn't staged or rehearsed. You couldn't fake the kind of reactions he'd captured on camera. That evening, after everyone had left, David and Isabella sat in his office reviewing the recordings. The sun was setting again, just like it had been 2 weeks ago when they'd first met. But everything felt different now. "This is incredible," David said, watching the screen as the retired firefighter broke down crying, releasing decades of pain he'd been holding inside. "People need to see this." Isabella looked uncertain. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we should share this. Put it online. Let people around the world experience what these 9 people experienced today." "I don't know," Isabella said slowly. "What if people think it's fake? What if they accuse us of hiring actors or editing the footage?" David had thought about that too. In today's world, people were suspicious of everything. Everyone assumed things were manipulated or staged for views and likes. But he also knew that truth had a way of shining through if you presented it honestly. "Look," he said, turning to face her, "there will always be skeptics. Always. But think about all the people out there who are struggling right now. People like your mother was. People who need help but can't afford therapy or don't respond to medication. What if your music could reach them?" Isabella bit her lip, thinking, "My mother would have wanted me to share it. She always said hiding your gifts is just another form of selfishness." "Smart woman," David said gently. "But if we do this, we have to be careful," Isabella insisted. "I don't want this to become some viral trend where people use it for entertainment. This is serious. This is people's emotional well-being we're talking about." David understood her concern. He'd seen too many meaningful things get turned into jokes or memes on the internet, but he also believed that most people were good. Most people would recognize something valuable when they saw it. "Here's what I'm thinking," he said. "We post one video, just one. We show you playing, and we show genuine reactions from today's session. We explain briefly what you've discovered, but we keep it simple. No complicated science talk that will lose people, just honest human emotion. Then we see how people respond." Isabella stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the darkness. David could see her reflection in the glass, could see the internal battle playing out on her face. "If we do this and it goes wrong," she said quietly, "if people mock it or try to steal my research or turn it into something cheap, I don't know if I could handle that." "And if we don't do it," David replied, "how many people will continue suffering who could have been helped?" That was the question that hung between them. The weight of it filled the office. Finally, Isabella turned back to face him. "Okay, one video. But we do it my way. We focus on the people it helps, not on me. This isn't about making me famous or making money. This is about sharing something that can make people's lives better." "Agreed," David said immediately. "This is about them, not us." They spent the next 3 hours editing footage. David had done enough video work over the years to know how to put together something compelling. But he made sure to keep Isabella's wishes in mind. They chose clips that showed real, raw emotion. They included brief explanations from the participants about what they'd felt. They showed Isabella playing but kept the focus on the music's impact rather than on her. At midnight, they finally had a finished video. It was 7 minutes long. Simple, honest, powerful. What should we call it? Isabella asked. David thought for a moment. How about when music touches the soul, you have to hear this to believe it? Isabella made a face. That sounds kind of clickbaity. It is, David admitted. But it's also true. People literally have to hear this to believe it. And if a clickbait title is what gets them to watch, then that's what we'll use. Once they see it, they'll understand. Isabella took a deep breath. Okay, let's do it. David's finger hovered over the upload button. This was it. Once he pressed this, there was no going back. Whatever happened next would happen whether they were ready or not. Together? He asked. Isabella reached over and placed her hand next to his on the mouse, and together? She confirmed. They clicked the button. Together. The video uploaded to his channel with 50,000 subscribers he'd built over years of posting music content. David had no idea if those 50,000 people would even watch it. He had no idea if it would get 10 views or 10,000. He definitely had no idea that within 48 hours, their lives would change forever. But that night, sitting in his office with Isabella, watching the upload progress bar reach 100%, David felt something he'd been chasing his entire career. Purpose. Real, meaningful purpose. Now what? Isabella asked. David leaned back in his chair. Now we wait and see if the world is ready for what you've discovered. Neither of them went home that night. They ordered pizza and kept refreshing the video page, watching the view count slowly tick upward. 10 views, 20, 50, 100. By sunrise, it had 2,000 views. By noon the next day, everything would explode. David woke up on his office couch to his phone buzzing nonstop. He'd fallen asleep around 3 in the morning after watching the view count reach 5,000. His neck hurt from the awkward angle and his mouth tasted like cold pizza and regret. He grabbed his phone, squinting at the bright screen. 57 missed calls. Hundreds of text messages. His email inbox showed 847 unread messages. His heart started racing. Isabella, he called out, his voice rough from sleep. Isabella, wake up. She was curled up in the armchair across from him, her notebook clutched to her chest like a security blanket. She stirred slowly, looking disoriented. What's wrong? She mumbled. David opened the video page on his phone. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped it. The number on the screen didn't make sense. It couldn't be real, 2 million views. Oh my God. Isabella breathed, suddenly wide awake. She scrambled over to look at his phone. That can't be right. But it was right. In less than 24 hours, their simple 7-minute video had been viewed 2 million times. And the numbers were still climbing. They could literally watch it go up in real time. 2,015,000, 2,043,000, 2,092,000. Look at the comments, David said, scrolling down with trembling fingers. There were thousands of comments, and they were still pouring in. David started reading them out loud. I haven't cried in 15 years, and this made me sob like a baby. Thank you. My therapist has been trying to help me process my father's death for months. 3 minutes of this music did what months of therapy couldn't. I don't understand how this is possible, but I just listened and felt peace for the first time since my diagnosis. This is either the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced or the most elaborate hoax on the internet. Either way, I'm crying. Isabella sank back into the chair, her face pale. This is happening too fast. I'm not ready for this. David understood her fear. Going viral was terrifying, especially when you weren't prepared for it. But as he kept scrolling through the comments, he saw something that made his chest tight with emotion. Real people were being helped. Truly helped. One comment from a woman named Helen stood out. I lost my son 2 years ago and haven't been able to listen to music since. It hurt too much. But something made me click on this video. I listened to that piano piece, and for the first time since he died, I felt like I could breathe again. Like maybe I could keep living. Whoever you are, thank you for giving me that gift. David showed the comment to Isabella. Tears filled her eyes immediately. This is why, he said softly. This is exactly why we had to share it. His phone rang again. It was Lisa, his assistant. David, where are you? She practically shouted. There are news crews outside the studio. Actual news crews with cameras. And your email is exploding. I'm talking producers from major networks, record labels, research institutions. Everyone wants to talk to you and Isabella. We'll be down in 10 minutes, David said, trying to sound calmer than he felt. They quickly tried to make themselves presentable. Isabella ran her fingers through her hair and splashed water on her face in the bathroom. David put on a clean shirt he kept in his office for emergencies. Neither of them looked great, but this wasn't about looking great anymore. When they went downstairs, David wasn't prepared for what he saw. Lisa hadn't been exaggerating. There were 3 news vans parked outside. Reporters with microphones stood on the sidewalk. A small crowd had gathered, people holding up their phones trying to record whatever was happening. "Is that her?" someone shouted when Isabella stepped outside. "Is that the pianist?" Suddenly everyone was pushing forward, shouting questions, holding out phones and cameras. Isabella froze, overwhelmed by the chaos. David quickly put his arm around her shoulders and guided her back inside. "We need a plan," he said once they were safely back in the office. "This is bigger than either of us expected." Over the next few hours, they tried to manage the flood of attention. David's phone never stopped ringing. The video kept climbing. 3 million views. 5 million. 8 million. It was spreading across every social media platform. People were sharing it, talking about it, debating whether it was real or fake. Some of the messages were beautiful. People sharing their stories of healing and hope, but others were harsh. Skeptics accused them of hiring actors. Internet trolls made cruel jokes. A few people even claimed Isabella was dangerous, that she was manipulating people's minds. "Don't read those," David told her when he caught her scrolling through negative comments, tears streaming down her face. "Focus on the people you're helping." But it wasn't that simple. The negative voices were loud and they got under Isabella's skin. By evening, she was having a panic attack in David's office, struggling to breathe. "I can't do this," she gasped. "I'm not built for this kind of attention. I'm a researcher, not a celebrity. I just wanted to help people." "And you are helping people," David insisted, kneeling beside her chair. "Look, I know this is overwhelming. Trust me, I get it. But think about Helen. Think about all the other people like her who found relief because you were brave enough to share your gift." Isabella wiped her eyes. "What do we do now? I don't even know where to start with all these requests." That's when David's phone rang again. This time it was a number he recognized. His old mentor, a man named Vincent who taught him everything about the music industry. Vincent had connections everywhere and a reputation for giving solid advice. "David, I saw your video," Vincent said without preamble. "That pianist of yours, she's the real deal, isn't she?" "She is," David confirmed. "And we're completely overwhelmed right now. I don't know how to handle this. I figured as much. Listen, you're about to get offers from everyone. Record labels will want to sign her. Pharmaceutical companies will want to buy her research. Tech companies will want to turn it into an app. You need to be very careful about who you trust." David felt his stomach drop. He hadn't even thought about all of that. "What should we do?" "First, stop answering your phone for everyone except people you absolutely trust. Second, get a lawyer, a good one. You're going to need legal protection for Isabella's work. Third, and this is the most important part, don't make any decisions while you're emotional and exhausted. People will try to pressure you into signing contracts or making commitments. Don't do it." "Okay," David said, his mind racing. "Okay, that's good advice, David. Remember why you did this in the first place. Money and fame have a way of corrupting even the best intentions. Keep that pianist grounded in her original purpose, or this whole thing will turn into something neither of you recognize." After hanging up, David shared Vincent's advice with Isabella. She looked relieved to have some kind of roadmap forward. "He's right," she said. "We can't lose sight of why I developed this. It was never about money or being famous. It was about helping people heal." They decided to take Vincent's advice and stop responding to everything. Instead, they released a simple statement on David's social media. It said they were grateful for the overwhelming response, that Isabella's work was real and based on years of neuroscience research, and that they needed time to figure out the best way to move forward while staying true to their mission of helping people. The statement didn't stop the chaos, but it bought them some breathing room. That night, as the video crossed 15 million views, David and Isabella sat in his office again. The gold records on his wall seemed to shine differently now. Those achievements belonged to his old life. The life before Isabella walked in and changed everything. Are you sorry you came to me? David asked quietly. Isabella thought about it for a long moment. No, she finally said. I'm terrified, but I'm not sorry. My mother used to say that anything worth doing will scare you. If you're not scared, you're probably not trying hard enough. Smart woman, David said, echoing what he'd told her weeks ago. She was, Isabella agreed, touching the photo of her mother that she kept in her notebook. I just hope I'm making her proud. You are, David assured her. Trust me, you are. Outside, the city hummed with its usual noise, but inside that office everything felt suspended in time. They were standing at a crossroads, and whatever decision they made next would determine not just their futures, but potentially the futures of millions of people who desperately needed what Isabella had discovered. The question was no longer whether her music worked. The world had seen that it did. The real question now was what they would do with that power. Would they protect it and use it wisely, or would they let it be consumed by an industry that valued profit over people? David looked at Isabella, at this woman who'd walked into his life with nothing but a worn notebook and a gift that could change the world. Whatever happens next, he said, we face it together, and we do it the right way. For your mother, for all the people who need help, for everyone who's suffering and searching for relief. Isabella nodded, determination replacing the fear in her eyes. Together, she agreed, the right way, but neither of them could have predicted what would happen when the biggest pharmaceutical company in the world showed up at their door with an offer that would test every principle they'd just committed to protecting. The men in expensive suits arrived, exactly 1 week after the video went viral. 3 of them, carrying leather briefcases and wearing watches that probably cost more than David's car. They represented Meridian Health Solutions, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. David and Isabella met them in a conference room they'd rented specifically for this meeting. They'd received dozens of similar requests, but this one felt different. Meridian wasn't just offering money. They were offering resources, legitimacy, and the chance to help millions of people on a scale Isabella had only dreamed about. The lead representative, a man named Richard, spread several documents across the table. His smile was practiced and professional, the kind of smile that had closed countless deals. What you've discovered is remarkable, Richard began. Our research team has analyzed your video and the responses. The therapeutic potential here is enormous. Depression, anxiety, PTSD, chronic pain management. Your emotional algorithms could revolutionize mental health treatment. Isabella leaned forward, interested despite her caution. What exactly are you proposing? We want to partner with you to develop this properly. Clinical trials, peer-reviewed studies, FDA approval for therapeutic use. We have the resources to turn your research into legitimate medicine that doctors can prescribe. Think about it. Instead of reaching people through viral videos, you could be helping patients in hospitals and clinics worldwide. It sounded amazing. Everything Isabella had worked for, validated and expanded beyond her wildest dreams. David could see the hope lighting up her face, and in exchange, David asked, his voice careful. Richard slid a contract across the table. In exchange, we would acquire the rights to your research and algorithms. You would be compensated generously, of course. We're prepared to offer $20 million up front, plus royalties on any therapeutic applications we develop. $20 million. The number hung in the air like a physical thing. David had never seen that much money in his entire life. He glanced at Isabella, whose hands were trembling as she looked at the contract. Can we have some time to review this? David asked. Of course, Richard said smoothly. Though I should mention, we're not the only ones interested. Several other pharmaceutical companies have reached out to us asking if we're in talks with you. Time is somewhat of the essence here. This offer may not be available indefinitely. The pressure tactic was obvious, but it still worked. After the men left, David and Isabella sat in silence, staring at the contract. $20 million, Isabella whispered. I could fund research for decades with that money. I could help so many people. But you wouldn't own your own work anymore, David pointed out gently. They would control how it's used, who gets access to it, how much it costs. Is that what your mother would have wanted? Isabella's face crumpled. I don't know. I'm so tired, David. I haven't slept properly in a week. My email has 10,000 unread messages. Strangers recognize me on the street. Part of me just wants to sign this contract and let someone else handle everything. David understood that exhaustion. The weight of responsibility was crushing them both. But something in his gut told him this wasn't right. Vincent's warning echoed in his mind. Don't let money corrupt your intentions. Let me tell you what I think will happen if you sign that, David said slowly. Meridian will take your algorithms and patent them. They'll develop treatments that work, but they'll charge insurance companies thousands of dollars per session. Most people won't be able to afford it. The people who need it most, people like your mother who struggled to pay for basic medication, they'll never get access to what you created. You don't know that, Isabella protested, but her voice lacked conviction, don't I? That's how the pharmaceutical industry works. They're not evil, but they're a business. Profit comes first. Your research would just become another product on a shelf, priced out of reach for ordinary people. Isabella put her head in her hands. Then what do we do? I can't keep going like this. The pressure is too much. David stood up and walked to the window. Outside, regular people were going about their day. Walking their dogs, carrying groceries, heading to work. Normal people living normal lives, many of them carrying invisible pain. Then an idea struck him. A crazy, possibly stupid idea that went against everything the music industry had taught him. But maybe that was exactly why it was the right thing to do. What if we just gave it away? He said quietly. Isabella looked up, confused. What? Your research. Your algorithms. What if we just published everything online for free? Made it available to anyone who wants to use it. Therapists, musicians, researchers, regular people. No patents, no profits, no corporate control. Just free access for everyone. That's insane, Isabella said. We'd make no money. All my years of work would just be free? Yes, David said, turning to face her. And it would help more people than any pharmaceutical company ever could. Think about it. Music therapists could use your techniques immediately. Musicians could incorporate them into their work. Researchers could build on your foundation without paying licensing fees. People suffering right now could access healing without insurance or expensive treatments. Isabella stood up, pacing the room. But what about funding future research? What about paying bills? I can't just live on air and good intentions? We could set up a foundation, David suggested, his mind racing now. Accept donations from people who want to support the work. Maybe offer workshops or training sessions for therapists who want to learn your methods. There are ways to sustain this without selling out. A foundation, Isabella repeated, testing the words. Like a nonprofit? Exactly. We maintain control of the mission. We make sure it stays focused on helping people, not generating profits, and you keep ownership of your work. You decide how it's used and who gets access. Isabella stopped pacing and looked at the contract on the table. $20 million. Security, validation. Everything society told her she should want. Then she looked at the photo of her mother in her notebook, still sitting on the table where she'd left it. She remembered her mother's final words. Share this with the world. Don't let fear stop you from helping people who are suffering. Her mother hadn't said, make money from this. She hadn't said, get rich and famous. She'd said, help people. That was the only instruction that mattered. Okay, Isabella said, her voice suddenly strong. Let's do it. Let's give it away. David felt a rush of relief and terror at the same time. They were about to turn down $20 million to give away something that could have made them wealthy beyond imagination. Every practical part of his brain screamed that this was a mistake. But his heart knew it was right. Over the next month, they worked harder than they'd ever worked before. Isabella compiled all her research into a comprehensive document. Every algorithm, every formula, every technique she'd developed over 10 years. David helped her create video tutorials explaining how to use the emotional frequencies. They made it as accessible as possible, breaking down complex neuroscience into language anyone could understand. They launched a website and uploaded everything for free. No paywall, no subscription, no hidden costs. Just open access to information that could help people heal. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Music therapists around the world downloaded the materials and started incorporating Isabella's techniques into their practices. Independent musicians began creating their own healing compositions based on her formulas. Universities reached out offering to collaborate on research. Mental health clinics asked for training sessions. Donations started coming in too. Small amounts mostly. $20 here, $50 there. People who'd been helped by the music and wanted to support the work. It wasn't $20 million, but it was enough to keep going. Enough to prove that doing the right thing didn't mean going broke. 6 months later, David and Isabella were sitting in that same office where they'd first met. The video had been viewed over 50 million times now. Thousands of people had shared stories of how Isabella's music had helped them through dark times. Therapists reported breakthrough results using her techniques. Researchers were publishing papers building on her work. "Do you ever regret it?" David asked. "Turning down all that money?" Isabella smiled, and it was the first genuine, peaceful smile he'd seen from her in months. "Not even for a second. You know what I got yesterday? A letter from a woman whose teenage daughter was suicidal. She said my music gave her daughter a reason to keep living. She said I saved her child's life." Her voice broke with emotion. "You can't put a price on that. $20 million, $200 million, it doesn't matter. That letter is worth more than any amount of money anyone could ever offer me." David nodded, feeling that same sense of purpose that had driven them from the beginning. "Your mother would be proud." "I think she would be," Isabella agreed, touching the photo she still kept close. "I think she'd be really proud. They'd chosen the harder path. The path that didn't lead to mansions and luxury cars and magazine covers, but it was the path that led to real change, real healing, real impact on the world, and that made all the difference." The story of Isabella and her emotional algorithms continued to spread, not because of marketing campaigns or corporate backing, but because it genuinely helped people. And in the end, that was all she'd ever wanted, to take the pain her mother had suffered and transform it into something that could ease the pain of others. Sometimes the most powerful things in life aren't the ones we keep for ourselves. Sometimes they're the things we give away freely, trusting that doing good is its own reward. And sometimes, just sometimes, that trust is rewarded in ways money could never measure.